These are African rhythms, passed down to us through ancient spirits. Feel the spirit, a unifying force. Come on, move with the spirit. Stand up, clap your hands. Groove with the rhythms, get down, get off.
From WSNC 90.5 FM, a broadcasting service and NPR affiliate of Winston-Salem State University, welcome to Africa World Now Project. I'm your host and producer, James Pope. Today, Saul Williams and Anisia Uzeyman on their film, Neptune Frost and Other Things. Africa World Now Project is next. Art in all manifestations has purpose, and that purpose is defined by those who are able to pick it up and use it. The spiritual, intellectual, and physical energies that are put into the creation of art are a reflection of the worldview of the artist not in an individualistic sense, but of the collective energies that culminate into the being that is producing the art. Their ancestors, the environment, the community, the material and non-material realities. Amiri Baraka, in his article Black Art, published in the Black Scholar, suggests that art is an expression of life. There will be a few people who would probably contradict that, who might say that life is an expression of art, but we believe that art is an expression of life, that art as such expresses the values of the artist, and as such it is a manifestation of the artist's value system. John Coltrane once said that he wanted to play music that changed the world. I would decode this to mean he wanted to find the universal melodies that move the human mind, body, and spirit to become a vessel of peace and justice. It would not be misinformed to say that Alice Coltrane's appearance in his life was the catalyst to push him further into spirit music. I thought it was important to contextualize our program today, which features a conversation with Saul Williams and Anisia Uzeyman in this way, because to understand their offering, Neptune Frost, is to understand the interplay between futurity, centered on an Africana futurity, is to see how non-material realities are made material. It is to understand that rhythm is indeed the foundation of all creation, and art is the most readily available medium to express rhythm. More importantly, it shows us that Africa is the hidden face of God. It is here I quote Cheryl Isajay, who plays Neptune in the film. "My truth is encrypted, and yours is easy to read." What we will hear next is a conversation that I had with Saul Williams and Anisia Uzeyman, where we explore the art of Neptune Frost through futurity as a lens to understand the processes of exploitation, yet to see the world beyond it. Saul Williams is a lyricist, singer, songwriter, musician, poet, writer, and professional disruptor of normative assumptions of realities. Anisia Uzeyman is a Rwandan director, actress, cinematographer, playwright, and a professional disruptor of normal realities as well. Tap into her film Dream States to see why. And also go see Neptune Frost. Our show was produced today in solidarity with the Native, Indigenous, African, and Afro-descendant communities of Standing Rock, Venezuela at Corporation Jackson in Jackson, Mississippi, Brazil, the Avalon Village in Detroit, Colombia, Kenya, Palestine, South Africa, Ghana, Haiti, and other places who are fighting for the protection of our land for the benefit of all peoples. Enjoy the program.
I'm just born once in a lifetime. Who am I to make things up? I count the stars, but will they count me? Who am I to lift them up? the socialists ask me, who am I as the police? Who am I but a reflection of that uniform beneath? I was born in a forgotten day, born in a forgotten day, but I own the night, I own the night. I snuck back through time hacks, a mountain of stars over the sea. The rippling torment of solitude, I will reach you if only to shake you awake. Beneath the crust and mantle of this planet is a birthplace, a crystal of light peering through ocean breath and form. I am as conscious of its eye, as in my essence I and I am both the music and the boom bass of the storm. I own the night and the stars, bright as suns of distant galaxies. I am the darkness of my earth form holding space. I own the night and the spectrum of awareness and fatality. I take the form of every lover's face, deep in the eye, in the moonlight satellite of every pupil. I am the light in its waveform. I'm grace. I own the night in the dream space of a planet. In a planet, I own the night that each day works to erase.
Greetings. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. It is a great pleasure to have you both on the program today. How are you doing?
We're doing wonderful.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. What I wanted to do today is, of course, we are here today because of this very, very important film that you guys have done. I remember when you were doing, was it crowdsourcing for the film a few years ago? And I picked up on it. Of course, I followed your work personally for years. And what ended up happening is that I began to follow it. I began to kind of track and, to see, how the project was coming. So again, the film that we're talking about in this particular moment, of course, is Neptune Frost that you guys have given us. And what I wanted to do today is really have just a organic conversation. Of course, we are going to be featuring the film as opening night. It's the opening film for the new African Film Festival held in Washington, D.C. We hold that every March of every year. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to just have an off-the-cuff conversation. Hopefully it'll be a little different than what you guys are kind of normal and used to, because I really want to kind of tug on some of the ideas and some of the deep resonance that you guys have had, particularly in the work that you have done over the course of the years, and how Anisia is actually expanding that. Because I'm looking at John Coltrane and Alice Coltrane, right? I'm thinking, how Alice Coltrane comes in John Coltrane life, but then just expands that. So let's talk about, those particular things. Now, as I was looking at this film and as I was thinking, I could not help but notice similarities. And the first thing that popped up to me was Sun Ra, Space is a Place. Was space and the place in your mind, or what were the continuities, or what were some of the things that influenced you both about putting this film together?
Well, I think we need to be clear on the fact that in terms of Anisia and my collaboration, we both come from a world of references in terms of sound, literature, theater, and film, and although I do think that sometimes it's oftentimes that people, with Afrofuturism in the social dialogue and Sun Ra in the social dialogue, I can see why clearly, someone might point, in that direction. But I think it's also important to point to the references in cinema that for example, I mean, Anisia can speak to the stuff that she was really.
I think we can talk about Russian cinema, for instance. What is interesting with Sunrise that it just also says that it's a research, it's a form of research for, new ways of telling stories. It's reclaiming how narratives are told. And I do think that, Space is the Place is really a work on that, right? Because he's creating his genesis, right? He's creating his cosmogony. And in that sense, I think it's true that Neptune Frost is also creating a world. It's a world building with heroes and heroines that are, new, that are
that creating our own, placing ourselves in new ways of seeing ourselves. But in terms of film references, there's and there's people like Wong Kar-wai.
I was talking about Russian
right.
because of Tarkovsky. I think Tarkovsky did a fantastic job at creating new spaces with existing landscape. And he also had this proximity to poetry that influenced the way the story is waved and his, of course, his work on camera. Wong Kar-wai, of course, for his. It's funny, I think that's somebody that filmed beautifully Argentina, for instance, not being Argentinian, who has a relationship to colors and to their emotions. And then also musicals.
Like Orfeo Negro, like The Wiz, like the musical Once out of Ireland. There's tons of influences, and then of course literature. Like I didn't grow up listening to Sun Ra, but I did grow up reading Octavia Butler. And as a teenager, I was reading Octavia Butler. As a teenager, I was reading, Alice Walker and Temple of My Familiar as the fantastic, sort of sequel to The Color Purple. And a lot of people go with Color Purple, but it's Temple of My Familiar to me that goes, wait a second. Do you see what's happening here? There's, and so those sort of things, reading that at 16 and 17, the short stories of Borges or like there's all these things, the plays of Amiri Baraka, there's all these sort of literary influence as well that goes into the style of the film, as well as musical and the desire to have a musical that reflects the music that we want to hear, in the same way that we want to have images that reflect the worlds and narratives that we want to see.
And then the African continent, the artists coming out from there, like Jibril Job Mambeti, who is a master, but also the new scene on the continent is very present in Neptune Frost in terms of references and desire to dialogue with the new wave of photographers, which is amazing, from South Africa to North Africa. It's just visual art is booming, and it's very interesting. Designers
Yeah.
And music.
And so and so the film is in conversation with all of those things. Yeah.
No, I love it because and we could come back to this notion of Afrofuturism and pop jargon, because one of the things I try to do is kind of disrupt that particular very limited, narrow, because what you guys have just basically done is basically really talked about how the art of storytelling in Africana context expands upon these themes, So the time construct is important here. This idea that time is really expanded. How do we think about? Because time was a theme in Neptune Frost. So we can come back to, I would definitely love your, both of you guys' perceptions of this, of being kind of typecast into this Afrofuturism, this notion, because people often associate Sun Ra and then they're talking about Afrofuturism. But what you guys have done is talked about what I actually have done in the lectures. We need to expand that concept. That concept is not just a aesthetic concept. It is an absolutely, a spiritual, intellectual. It's a very all-encompassing concept. Let's back up for a second here, because one of the things that I thought that was important that you talked about was these themes. How did you choose the themes? How did you go about collaborating, looking at the themes? And then I guess this also goes into the fact that the music was a very instrumental part in the origins of the film, correct?
Yes. So first off, the idea was partially born when Anisia and I were acting in a film that was being shot in Senegal. So we were in Dakar. It's a film by
Alain Gomis.
Alain Gomis, called Aujourd'hui. And we both act in this film. We play husband and wife in the film. It's responsible partially for how we met. And while we were there, we were already kind of brainstorming on ways to, storytelling ideas, ways to work together. And the observation was kind of rooted in one, watching teenagers build drums and participate in like neighborhood drum ceremonies, while at the same time like having on like Beats headphones and smartphones while building a drum, and seeing the connection between the old and new technology in terms of everything, because drum rhythms and patterns is coding as well, right? So all of that. This was 2010, 2011. So it's also the time of the Arab Spring, WikiLeaks. It's a time where we're learning about the evangelists in America that are, stepping into African countries and trying to get anti-gay laws passed and all this stuff. There's Chelsea Manning, there's all this stuff going on, and wanting to write a story that kind of connects these worlds. So it kind of came from there. And so once the idea was born, for me, the first step was creating a soundscape, because we were also, as Anisia said, looking at a lot of art and artists on the continent that were doing a lot of work with, like, let's say, recycled computer parts, that were doing work, all types of, reclaiming narrative through creative and visual works, installation works and what have you. And so one of the first things we imagined was a village made of recycled computer parts and a story taking place there. And the idea of creating what that thing sounds like was how, like, building that sonic landscape was how I was able to start piecing together ideas surrounding the characters, the story, and what have you. So the music came first, is what I was saying. In many ways, in terms of once the writing process began, it was the music that helped feed it.
Mm-hmm. Anisia, your role in actually making that material, visualizing that, right? I mean, that was your role in how you're taking all of these ideas and making them real, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little more fluid than that, since I think the hearing the music being created. So I really saw every step of that landscape, and then all the character being like, taking life through their own songs, and so I had we went on a residency to write together about how to the dialogues and what was important in terms of narrative. And then when we had that, it's true that sometimes I would come and say, oh, okay, so you're talking about a dream. How do we film a dream? And so we would talk about how we translate that visually, and I would propose some approaches in terms of lights, in terms of movements,
and writing,
and that he would would end up in the writing of the script, that is also giving a rhythm and giving a detail on space, and what exactly, what kind of moon is there, if we are not in a realistic place, what
color is that moon, and all of that.
So which is also writing, but more visually, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Collecting images. You did a huge work in collecting source images at first.
Yeah.
That was helping feed the idea.
The ideas of I think there were a few things that were of very, very of interest for us, which was how do we tell a story about reclaiming our own power, without becoming a tyrant. How also on fluidity, I think, and on femininity. What does that mean? How do we film that? How do we, make a love story without
falling into
the tropes of the representation of that, right?
Yeah,
which
of gender and sex and all of these things. And then of course there's two things that we didn't mention so far that are also strongholds in terms of the building of this, was the discovery of the minerals that are in all of our smartphones and laptops, and where they're mined and how they're mined. The one we focused on was coltan, and our discovery of e-waste camps, which is where our computers go to die, and those e-waste camps exist always close to the place where the minerals are mined. So the planes fly in and drop off all of our old dead computer parts, and they land in these village-sized places where people source the copper, the wire, all this stuff from the motherboards, and then those same planes are filled with the minerals that then go to the places that build computers, and they're filled with coltan, cobalt, and all these things. And of course, 85% of the coltan that's used in our laptops and smartphones, drones, what have you, is sourced in Central Africa, in the Congo and the areas surrounding. And so it's that was also a huge part of the
thing that we wanted to talk about. Yeah. And we actually, in 2016, you were talking about the crowdfunding. In 2016, we went in Rwanda to kind of, cast and scout and make that little scissor reel for the campaign. And we went on a research about that coltan business in the region, and it's pretty fascinating.
We visited a refinery.
So all those elements, those more trivial elements are also nourished the narrative that in Neptune Frost. Yeah.
No, this is very important because this is one of the primary mechanisms through which multinational corporations and different entities keep this region destabilized, right? Because there's a constant fight over these. I wanted to Anisia, I wanted to know how much of your background, of your development, helped you develop your eye, develop your understanding of putting together images and putting together the development of how to make these things, how to make these ideas material. Because one of the things I wanted to kind of back up and tease out, which you guys did in this film very, very astutely, is this notion of gender. You know, from African context, this notion of gender is a principle not biologically associated. It's a principle that moves and you know, the idea is not biological. How much of your background, how much of your development helped you, or does it, or how does it still help you develop your cinematography, how you're approaching filmmaking?
I think I'm approaching all those things from a very emotional place. I think that's what makes that's maybe what makes my strength, and also, you know, makes me go forward and ahead. I think I come from, like Saul, we both come from a background of acting. So of being like in the skin of those characters, and in the interpretation of those texts, and in the understanding of those contexts. So in terms of image, I think it's interesting to approach storytelling on that scale from that point of view. And so it makes, I think, that work very, maybe a little more free. So meaning that I'm not approaching it strictly in a term of technique, or in terms of, you know, strictly technical. I always ask myself, why are we showing this? Who is showing it, and who is seeing it? Who is the camera? From where do we propose this image and this movement? And what is the emotion that this color is giving to the actor? How does this convey the scene, or the moment we have to achieve here? So then I had the luck to be surrounded by a very good technician that would tell me, like, oh, you are overstepping here. You cannot do this. They all the time say this. And the thing when you are coming from that perspective is that you can never believe that. So that's where it's, I think, where I think I can say what makes me special, and it's that I can never take no for an answer, for real, because I don't really understand why would that be possible or impossible. So yeah.
It's like you know, you referenced that Coltrane thing in the morning, in the beginning of this thing, but the idea of, it is the morning. By the way, we are speaking to you direct from Mexico City.
Yeah, right.
That's why we're not going to be able to be in, you know, Washington, D.C. when this film premieres there, is because we're in Mexico City. But yeah, the idea of knowing the rules, knowing the scales, and ripping around them, and there are other improvisational artists who don't know the scales and are able to explore and learn new things because they rip around them, the scales and or the rules or what have you. But the idea of knowing the so-called rules and attempting the impossible around those rules is exactly what the Coltranes, the Monks, that's part of why we lean towards them, is because those, these notes are not supposed to work next to these notes. But in fact, when you put those notes together, what they bring out is something extraordinary. And Anisia's approach to color and image is, I would say it's more knowing than not knowing, you know, but you do have the technicians who were like, but, because there's also a formulaic narrative that people are used to. And it's important, you know, and that's part of what Neptune Frost is also about, is saying, yeah, we understand that your relationship to narrative, we've grown up with that same relationship, but aren't you interested in the exploration of how we might tell a story differently? Aren't you interested in that?
And also, I think to complete this answer on, I think the desire for me to film Rwanda, which is where I was born, and to film it as I see it, meaning closer to my heart than to the, than to a fiction, than to something that is further away. So I think that's where all that, kind of melted together, in the sense of I just really wanted to show it as I see it, which is not how everybody sees it, let's say.
No, and that's important because, obviously in hearing what you're saying, and then also looking at the continuities and the work that you guys are bringing together. Saul, I want to, how has this influenced you, expanded you? This collaboration and meeting, your partner, looking at how has this expanded you specifically? Are there some things that you can identify in this particular moment, making this film, and also in your collaboration, that expanded the way that you think about the work that you do?
Well, I hope that first off, that answer is documented in this work, because that's what the work is, first and foremost, is for us a documentation of our shared, vision and collaboration and what we are able and capable of doing when we connect our forces, right? And of course, there's a lot connected to that. What it's done for me, though, is it means a lot to execute a vision. Anisia talked about something in like with the camera, in terms of like what perspective is this? Who's seeing this? What have you? It's the same sort of thing that I was looking for in the music, talking about the story coming out of the music and saying, well, who's singing this? Which character is singing this? Whose words are these? All this type of thing. But that's all connected to my childhood craving of wanting, like I said, to see a musical that reflects the music that we listen to, And so to have reached the point of saying, okay, now, I've been able to write a musical, and I had to go about it my way and maybe in a non-traditional way. But this is a musical, and your listeners should also understand that there's the writing of the script, there's the writing of the music, there's the writing of the text, there's the writing of the lyrics, and then there is our trip to Rwanda to collaborate with amazing poets, musicians, writers, artists, and the translation of that text and lyrics into Kinyarwanda, Kirundi, Swahili. That also was a precious and complicated step in regards to the music, in making that text for the music and the text for the dialogue for the film work, in the fact that it's not in English. But being attached to the story, the storytelling, as a poet, I was in a sense looking for a bigger page, which is the screen. And I just wanted to be able to say, I wrote the subtitles, that's essentially what's there. That was the text I was looking for, and so that's also a documentation of growth, being able to write a story that's more than preaching, that's more than, that's more than words coming out of one's own mouth, but being able to have something that makes sense coming out in the form of narrative, out of the voices of many and through the voices of many.
And work with so many.
Yeah, and to work
so many for you is also so, because it's, You have to imagine it's huge.
Yeah, the amount
It's
of
huge.
collaboration in this project is extraordinary. On the music side, on the image side, our ensemble, the costumes, the makeup. You have Lady Soulfly and her collaboration with Cedric Mizero, who's an extraordinary Rwandan artist, fashion designer, and Lady Soulfly, aka Tanya Melendez, who's doing hair and makeup, and their collaboration in the costumes in the film. You have so many other artists working with them, Ibisazi Collective, all these people helping us build our set. We built a village of recycled computer parts. Our ensemble is the Burundian drummers called the Himbaza Club, who, you know, there's so many, all of our artists in the film, all of our actors are poets, writers, dancers, actors, choreographers in their own right.
And sometimes very renowned too, you know?
Yeah. No, I was going to, you actually led me right to that question about, you know, I wanted you to talk about, you both talk about how you chose and why you chose the folk that you chose to be in this film.
Well, you know, as Anisia mentioned, we went in 2016 and began the casting process. We were, you know, frequenting a lot of shows through Anisia and friends, encountering a lot of artists and you know, beginning the screen test and auditioning process then. So some of our talent had time to marinate on the project as it was being developed. When we came back to shoot the film, there was still much more casting to do. There was, of course, we had to take it to the next level. We had to find choreographers. We had to do all this type of stuff. And then there's the, you know, so I just want to run off a few of the amazing people that are in the film because, for instance, Rwanda's most beloved and iconic singer, Cecile Kariegba, is featured in Neptune Frost. And for those who don't know her work, that would be like having someone like a Cecilia Evora or someone in your film. It's her, she's making her screen debut at the age of 74. And is extraordinary in the work. You have Dorsey Rugamba, who's in the film playing the role of Innocent, who's an extraordinary actor. You have Eliane Umihere, who's an extraordinary actress. Of course, our leads are played by Shirley Sheja, Kaya Free, and Bobo Elvis, who are musicians and dancers and performers from Rwanda and Burundi, respectively. You have our choreographers, Yannick, and my gosh, there's so many people.
I think
Mazambaya,
it makes me go back to the references and to some. I think there is also, because of the background of our background, there's also a way of processing that is very hip hop, inspired. I think
the vibe on the set.
Yes, I think hip hop is also a form that work with recycled materials,
mixed media,
and just invent something new, with it. And the way we met the people, the way they came, the way they enter, the zone of this story, is very much how, you make how you meet people and then start to vibe together and then start to,
the word gets out and people show up like, yeah.
So it was very like organic like that, and very there is a lot of poet and rappers and people also from
Eric Wanki, Kivumbi, extraordinary people that are renowned in Rwanda, and we hope that this film helps platform them beyond Rwanda. So there's that. Then also in the music, there's collaborations like Ganja Sufi, Ted Hearn, CX Kidtronic, Christian Scott, My Brightest Diamond. There's collaborators on the music side as well. Yeah, so there's a lot of collaboration.
No, this is important, and the organic process is truly Africana, right? The processes of being able to kind of move together. You mentioned this being a document. After I watched this film, one of the first things that I wrote down was that this is a text. I actually sent that out on social media, that this is not only, of course, it's very artistic, it's very, 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 very pleasing, very, very aesthetic, but there's some deep meaning. And one of the things that I saw immediately is that it was a text. And so someone who uses film as a form, as a mechanism through which to teach concepts and ideas, one of the things that I try to look for in a text is also what I would consider to be the main idea, right? And what I wanted to do at the end of the film, when this is stated, my truth is encrypted and yours is easily read. That struck me so much, because that seemed to really talk about that. Talk about, talk about it, is that the main idea of the film? Is that the main idea of this text? Is that, because it encapsulated so many levels and so many ideas that you are literally trying to document with this film?
Well, I would say that it's not encryption by choice. We have never aimed to hide our truths. But the fact that some would refuse to see it, the same way that some in the past, would refuse to see us as human, or the same way that some would refuse to acknowledge, the role that like you mentioned, multi-sites corporations and the exploitation of all of these precious resources that we take for granted in society. And it's bothersome to have to think about where your coffee comes from, and where your cotton comes from, and where your oil comes from, and where your rubber comes from, and where your gold comes from, and where your titanium comes from, and where your coltan comes from. And that list is exhaustive, and they all come from one place. So it's, so you don't want to have to think about that. So it's not that it's encrypted, but yes, the way in which the system works to exploit is easy to read. And yeah, in many ways, I would say that Neptune Frost is a reading.
No, and the way that I took encrypted
in the tarot sense, I mean.
Right. And the way I took encrypted was that it had a double meaning, right? It had the meaning, but it also was the fact that, to kind of pull on the fact that, colonizers and people who want to exploit want to purposefully not see it. So there is, the encrypted also had, for me as a person who studies resistance, it also had, the first thing I heard was the drum. And the drum in the context of being able to communicate underneath these systems of oppression, underneath these systems,
and through these systems,
right? Yeah. So that's exactly how I read it. I don't want to. We literally, you should see my page. I literally have 7 back-to-back pages of notes when I wrote this. I'm not going to go through all of them. Hopefully, we can have another conversation a little bit later. But I wanted to end on this. How can this film be used by communities who are actually struggling against a lot of these particular themes that you guys are laying out in this film? What do you envision this film as being something that opens a critical consciousness to the folk who are actually engaged in struggle on the grassroots level? How do you see this film being able to be used by communities all over the world, particularly African descendant and historically and ethnically marginalized communities?
Well, first off, I mean, I want to thank you as a professor for taking the time to look at this work and to raise questions and to see it as a text and what have you, because I think, as artists, we do our part. And we hand it to the academic world, we hand it to the activists, to the community leaders, and say, what can you do with this? Here is a tool that we've, created that hopefully you will find useful as you do your work, so that you can build a curriculum around it or insert it into your curriculum. And here's the things that we touched on here. It is not everything, but here is a contribution that hopefully, community leaders, professors, academics, all these people can say, yeah, I want to make sure my peeps see this. We want to talk about this. We want to, And so I think it's very much about that, first off.
It's very much also touching about around the idea that we have to free narratives. And I do think that is an important debate that we can have all together, and that can also help us resist and invent and free forms and actually see, I don't know, we were talking about margins or things like that, see them at the center of it all, And
yeah, there's that wonderful Toni Morrison quote that Anisia referenced the other day, saying that where Toni Morrison says, I
stood at the margin.
Yeah, I stood at the margin and waited for the center to come to me.
And this film, I guess, is also really exploring the idea that everybody knows where the center is. It's just a matter of showing it and having the desire to see it.
No, thank you very much. I want to, I have to go back to the notion of Afrofuturism. We don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but I also wanted to make sure that I highlight something that Anisia just said, this idea of invention. This is Thomas Sankara, who talks about that we must invent the future. We must invent the future within which we want to see. So the continuities here, like I said, this film did so much to really actually make it easy for me to make a lot of the things that I teach young folk that I deal with, on a semester daily basis. Because again, I'm not only involved in academia. There's a number of things I do outside of academia as well. But no, that invention and inventing the future is a very, very important concept. I wanted to go, as we close this conversation, again, I really, really appreciate you guys, taking the time. It's early in Mexico City, and I really appreciate you guys taking the time out. But I wanted to end on, just some of your meditations on, this notion of, again, the dominant narrative of Afrofuturism, because, this idea of kind of, really looking at it in a limited concept, because the first thing the most dominant narrative on this film talks about, it really talks about it, it just puts it, Afrofuturism really in a very limited conceptualization of that. How do you guys feel? How do you guys feel about that? I mean, of course, an African future is there, right? This is obviously in the context of what you're doing. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, it's redundant.
Yeah. Yeah, no. Okay, cool. All right, listen.
I mean, at the end of the day, I think, we had many focuses while working on this, and our focus was we never discussed Afrofuturism per se. We discussed the images and ideas and the form of storytelling that we love. It's like discussing polyrhythm. Do you discuss polyrhythm, or do you play the drums and fall into that backbeat and go, holy shit, or dance? You know what I'm saying? It was so much more about exploring this world that's the world of Digitary in the film, the world that's spoken to through these characters, the dreams and the reality that they inhabit, and finding a way to translate that. And yes, we're very much aware of the fact that there are things being talked about in the public forum. And in some ways that can be useful because it helps, I guess, for people to have something to attach it to go, oh, okay, this is what they mean when they say da 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 da. And then once we engage up, we can go much deeper and go, yeah. But it means way more than that. And these worlds and this way of storytelling existed way before that term which you've used to describe it. There's so much more to be said.
Yeah, I think I like the story you're telling about that mineral, that is in that ground, and yeah, people walking and sleeping and living on those on the surface of those
living on the surface, walking, sleeping, burying their dead on this ground where all of these minerals are sourced. Right. And if we're burying our dead there and we're walking there and sleeping there and making love there, is the power in these minerals, the power of our life force inserted into them? In fact, when you pull those minerals out, is that our ancestral power in those minerals? Are we fueling wireless communication here? Is it our ancestral power that is fueling that? What happens when you sleep on that? What happens when you realize that power is sourced in you? What happens then? And so our film begins with the question, what is mind? Which of course floats the question about what is mind, right? And so that's, that.
And here we go, how you link, the past, the present, and how you project yourself into the future, and how Thomas Sankara is always,
Is always the one.
Always present, always present. Right? No,
Yeah.
It was very important. I think this notion of the discovery of a freedom principle in African humanity that's always been there through ancient time. Because again, time is looked at very, very linear, but in actuality, when we think about time, it's a continual process, and which you guys just really even though I've really talked about, as trying to, again, disrupt those dominant narratives. But again, it's a starting point. It's an entry point. I really thank you guys for taking the time to talk with us today. Much success on the rest of showing the film. I really would love to, stay in contact, figure out how we can have, more conversations moving forward.
We'd love to. We'd love to.
Thank you very much. All right, take care.
We hope everyone enjoys the film.
It's about that. Colton is cotton. Hacking the dietary sustenance, tradition versus health, hacking the comfort, compliance, hacking to the rebellious gene, hacking the doctrine, capitalism in relation to free labor and slavery, hacking to the history of the bank as beating the odds, a mere act of joining the winning team, hacking the desperation and loneliness, the balance of community and the marketplace, hacking the land rights and ownership, hacking the business law, proprietorship, hacking to ambition and greed, hacking the forms of government, the history of revolution, the relation to suffering and sufferance, hacking the faith and morality, the treatment of one faith towards another, hacking the masculinity, femininity, sexuality, what is taught, what is felt, what is learned, what is shared, hacking the gods, stories of creation, serpents and eggs, hacking the nature, biodynamics, biodiversity, cycles and seasons, hacking the time, calendars, Descartes, its relationship to doubt is wired the fear, the notion of control, the space-time continuum, the force of gravity, whether the opposite of gravity is freedom, hacking the freedom, power, responsibility, justice, the Bill of Rights, hacking the coincidence, the summer of 68, the 27 Club, the number of people with Facebook profiles, people who choose to share, people who share too much, people who seem lonely, people who want to uplift, people who want to connect, people who need uplifting, hacking the self-help, self-sufficiency, and self-indulgence, hacking the crazy, hacking the lunatic, hacking the star, hacking the infamous, notorious, hacking the narcissism, the effects of poverty on the psyche, the effects of race, the effects of cruelty, the victims that survived. There is a panel marked survival. 3 simple copper wires coiled around an orb, hacking the orbit, equatorial landmines, useful and precious metals, Colton as cotton, hacking the hazardous, nuclear, blue clear, cloud forming fish farm, cow farts and shit, hacking the horse, industrial, digital, hacking the code, use your instrument as metaphor, harness your craft, hacking to the mainframe, dismantle definition, dogma and duty, hacking the destiny, hacking the dreams, subtext and subconscious, hacking the heart, cardio, Congo, blood, rich and oil, hacking the suffering and despair, hacking the unfair advantage of those lucky enough to be born into one family or another, into one condition or another, hacking the circumstantial evidence that proves the obvious and wakes the oblivious, hacking the birthright, bloodlines, royal and tainted, hacking the superstition, old wives' tales, the rituals of the shaman, hacking the chemistry, the pharmaceutical industry, the modern-day rape of the forest, hacking the DNA, the coiling serpents, the time it takes for modern man to determine whether ancient man were foolish or not, hacking to the database, hacking to the subconscious, the panel mark survival, hacking to celebrity, hacking to the cultural development of taste, hacking to violence, fear, and ignorance. How are they linked?
We are the hallucination. are the evolution.
That's it for Africa World Now Project for this week. I would like to thank you for joining us today and look forward to spending time with you next week. We can be reached through all your regular social media platforms. Email africaworldnowproject@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter @AFWRLDNWPRJ. Instagram @Africa World Now Project. Access to our other media platforms can be reached through the bios of our social media. I'm your host and producer, James Pope. The Africa World Now Project Collective consists of international media journalist, executive producer, and human rights activist, Moiza Muntali, Africa World Now Project media correspondent, Funa Ngonda, senior research, content contributor, and production director, Dr. Tasneem Siddiqui, senior research, content contributor, and production associate, Dr. Josh Myers, associate producer and content contributor, Dr. Keisha Khan Perry, content contributor and filmmaker, Kurt Waterson, technology advisor, it's Byron Gray of Grayworks Technologies, and creative directors, international creative and artist designer, Tabassum Siddiqui and Judah Pope. Africa World Now Project can be heard every Wednesday at 7 p.m. on WSMC, NPR affiliate and broadcast service of Winston-Salem State University. Programs are archived and available on all podcast platforms. Search Africa World Now Project. Until next week, be safe, be peaceful, and above all, be intelligent.
Awakened by my elder brother. The compound was on fire. Awakened by my elder brother. The compound was on fire. Never hid their perspectives of land would rather see us disappear. Recyclable prayers. The people. This is my body which is given for you. The people. This is my blood.
We are the hallucination. We have been called the Indians. We have been called Native American. We have been called hostile. We have been called pagan. We have been called militant.
We are not a conquered people.